Hello everyone, and welcome to the Reading Party podcast with Megan and Lexie. Together, we'll watch, snack, and chat our way through books and films set in the ancient world. We bring our expertise as ancient historians to the table to dissect every detail. We hope you'll grab your favourite beverage and snacks and join us every week on this adventure. Before we start spilling the tea, a brief note on our content. The Reading Party podcast is created for adult audiences. The stories of the ancient world are full of violence and undisguised sexual content, and your hosts aren't afraid to curse up a storm. For those reasons, this podcast is not suitable for under 18s, and certain episodes may not be suitable for those living with trauma. This season focuses on the Iliad and Odyssey, known for both brutal violence and instances of sexual assault. Episode-specific warnings can be found in the show notes. But folks, please keep yourselves safe. With that in mind, let's get going. Lexie and I have our teas and are so ready to start spilling the tea on a ton of ancient stories. This week, we're talking about Wrath Goddess Sing, a 2022 book by Maya Dean. Drawing on ancient texts and modern archaeology to reveal the trans woman's story hidden underneath the well-known myths of the Iliad, Wrath Goddess Sing weaves a compelling, pitilessly beautiful vision of Achilles' vanished world. The gods wanted blood, she fought for love. An innovative spin on a familiar tale, this is the Trojan War unlike anything ever told, and an Achilles whose vulnerability is revealed by the people she chooses to fight, and chooses to trust.
Do you have your tea?
I do. I have green tea.
This is a combination. It's like a passion fruit, cinnamon, pepper thing.
That sounds amazing. I think everyone needs to know our tea recommendation. So, tea aside, we should talk about Wrath Goddess.
I guess, like, diving right into it, I mean, I guess the first thing we should probably say is, did you have any sort of conception, like did you go into it with like a mild idea of kind of what you were going to encounter, or were you like just picked up the book and were like, okay?
So yeah, I've not actually read any novelizations of the Iliad before, so I didn't have any actually that's not true. I've read Women of Troy, I guess, but in my brain that was super divorced from the Iliad, which is a really weird way to compartmentalize the book, because the Iliad is the entire goddamn backdrop. And we're not going into that because we will do an episode on that later. Anyway, so I don't know. So I read the Iliad when I was in college, because I did, my undergraduate degree was classics and Egyptology, Assyriology stuff. So I've read the original and studied it to a certain extent. So I know the story pretty well. And this is absolutely not what I was expecting. Even a little bit. Like you read the dust jacket and you're like, okay, cool, it's Achilles, and Achilles is trans, and it's going to be the Iliad with a female protagonist. It's absolutely not. It's amazing. And I think I got like 3 chapters in and I was like, this is A, fantastic, and B, absolutely not what I was expecting at all. How about you?
Yeah, I don't think I have actually read any novelization of the Iliad. I read the Iliad. I had to read it an astonishing 7 times in my 5 years of undergrad. 7. I don't think I had to read it all the way through each times, but I know I had 7 different classes through my 5 years of undergrad where they were like, you're going to read at least parts of the Iliad. So I'm like, okay, so I don't know. I feel like at some point I started to tune it out because I was like, yeah, I know the basics. Just, get me through the class.
It's this again, yeah.
So this was a completely new experience. And I knew I was excited. And I talked to Maya before I started reading. And so I was kind of like, can you tease a little bit? And she only teased a really small part, which was like, she was just like, beware of dolphins. Oh, and don't think of Helen as your normal, damsel in distress, whatever. And I was like, that's the only thing I've had in my mind. So then I started reading, and I think, honestly, I hit chapter 2, and then I was like, oh, this is what? It was so different. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm shocked, but in the best possible way. I was like mind blown.
Oh, in an absolutely amazing way. And it's a lot of it, I feel, is kind of taking maybe what we expect about historical novels and completely subverting them. And it's it's beautifully written. The plot is very, very compelling. So this episode, we're only talking up to chapter 19, which is about the first half of the book. And I'm going to work very hard to not spoil it and go further than that, because I actually have it open next to me with the first page of chapter 19 to make sure that I don't go further in the plot that I'm supposed to. But it's so, so good. And the characters are so well written and so well rounded. And it takes, for me, I think one of the key differences with what I was expecting is the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus, because everybody writing about the Iliad queers it, which is I'm all in favor of, clearly, but they queer it by making Achilles and Patroclus a romantic couple. And this manages to get at the intensely close and intimate relationship between the two characters without making it romantic. And I think that was A, very clever, and B, very, very well written.
I mean, I really love the direction it went in. I think I was more shocked, though, but like the portrayal, I suppose, of Agamemnon, because all you hear is,
actually,
from what you see in some popular movies out there, you just see kind of like old man who's grumpy and is power hungry, and he's just like, I want to go, conquer Troy because ha ha ha. And so the whole dynamic between them,
that was just also massively unexpected. How much of this are we spoiling?
I think we just go for it, because I think
go for it
later. Yeah, I guess I'm just gonna go for it. But like, to have her have a relationship, like an actual physical relationship with him, and to have him be like, oh yes, I'm actually quite kind and caring.
Yeah, kind of sensitive in a way, which again, not what you expect from Agamemnon.
Like, he's a raging dickweed, and I want him dead.
He's super sympathetic in this,
which is a weird feeling.
And Menelaus is just like,
yeah, what is up with him? I was like, okay, I mean, I suppose you could sort of feel sympathy for him anyway, just based on, he's the dude whose wife was either stolen or ran away, depending on interpretation. But having him be like, oh, I'm super protective over women, I just want to protect them all the time, I was like, what?
Yeah, it was very
I do think
I think this whole podcast could just be summed up with, this is really, really clever.
That should just be the name of the episode, right? This is a really clever book.
Yeah.
But no, I found it quite interesting. I mean, I grew up with the Percy Jackson books, and so I'm used to the modern day sort of expressions and words used. I was a little caught off guard when, to me, a lot of the book reads as very contemporary. Now, I don't know why that shocks me, because I'm like, well, it's for a contemporary audience, but since it's set in the ancient world, like there's a mixture of like ancient and modern expressions. I like it. It works. I think I was taken a little off guard. I was like, oh, would they know what this is? I mean, I think at one point, don't they talk about like there being an umbrella? And so when it's described, it's not like a modern umbrella. It's clearly described as being like some canvas and a stick or whatever. But to call it an umbrella, I'm like, whoa. So yeah, that was unexpected. But makes it read a bit easier, I suppose.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. We should probably like give a brief synopsis of what has happened.
Yes.
In the story up until chapter 19. I'm just like, this is amazing. I need to talk to you about it right away. But everyone else hasn't read it yet. So hasn't. My tenses are wrong. Anyway, it opens with Achilles on an island.
Skyros.
Yes, which I have not. Have you been to Skyros?
I've not been to Skyros. I've been to Skyros.
I have not been. But it opens with, he's on an island. He should not be doing that. She, misgendering Achilles there, apologies. She is on an island with a princess who is her girlfriend, and they're both trans women. And it's just, I mean, it's an amazing opening. Because it's not just, it's not a lazy queering of the story. I'm sorry, not very articulate when I get excited. It's the whole trans identity and storyline is essentially the main overriding factor of a lot of the book. It's not overwhelming and it's not repetitive, I don't think, but it's very much ingrained in the entire storyline. It's not this kind of big shocking thing that happens once you find out Achilles is a woman, and then it's never ever spoken of again. Like, the trans women in the book are central characters, and actually trans man, central characters, and they're beautifully and very well-roundedly, that's not a word, they're written in a very well-rounded fashion. And it opens with an entire community of trans women, and it was beautiful.
Yeah. And then it's interesting. So I was it was quite welcome but unexpected how they introduced the whole concept of basically the Trojan War, which is they have Diomedes and Odysseus like come to Skyros, and they're just,
I really liked him. I didn't want to like him because I never like Odysseus. He's a dickweed, but he was so good.
Yeah, so he comes and he's all cheeky, and he kind of has that just a funny guy energy, and then he's all just like, where's Prince Achilles? I'm looking for this prince that we all hear about. I mean, he's a little bit scrawny, but you know, we're here to whisk him away for this war. And Achilles is just like, LOL, I'm a woman, but I'm gonna play dumb and pretend to have no idea what you're talking about, and I'll help you look for this Prince Achilles. And then so it's great. So eventually, though, they discover it is indeed Achilles, but she's undergone like a mystical, magical transformation from the help of her godly mother, Athena, which was a departure from the normal, you know, sort of parentage of Achilles, which I kind of appreciate. I really appreciated it.
I think it was necessary.
But I like it so much more. Why can't Achilles always be the daughter of Athena? You know, it's very poetic. But yeah, she transforms her magically into a real woman, which I wasn't expecting. When I kind of heard, you know, okay, Achilles is a trans woman through the book, I thought she would just continue to, you know, be a trans woman, not transform. So that was kind of shocking, but really exciting. And then, yeah, she kind of gets whisked away to war. And then, oh goodness, I'm trying to remember what happens in the whole first half, because there's so much going on.
It's a lot. Yeah, no, a lot happens.
I'm like, wait, okay, so I'm...
So there's kind of like this confrontation between Achilles and her family, who had been seriously abusive to her growing up as a trans girl in a world that obviously is very patriarchal. So you get kind of flashbacks of this abuse, and she's thrown down a well and told she can't use the rope because the rope is only for the boy Achilles. So you kind of have that whole confronting of trauma and confronting of childhood bullies, which again, I think very well done. And you just dislike really everyone except Achilles to begin with. You're just all mean, homophobic bastards. I have no interest in any of you.
Although I did kind of like Diomedes, because he kind of was, you know.
And Odysseus
just kind of didn't know, because he was still under the impression that Achilles was a man. But Diomedes was kind of like, he didn't even give a hint as to like how he felt about the whole. He was just kind of like, hey, I'm here for this warrior, man. Like, let's go.
So yeah, they go in the ships to meet up with the rest of the Greek force, and then you get Agamemnon introduced, and he's like, well, like you said, he's not a bad guy.
He's described as this tall, sort of suave, handsome, deep voice, green-eyed, glistening, thoughtful dude. And then, you know, as he's being described, you're just like, is this the same Agamemnon as...
Is this a crush?
I mean, the way he's written, I'm like, well...
I mean, would I say no?
I don't think so.
Probably not.
Which is so weird to think about, because I'm just like, no, usually he's horrible.
I know you don't like him. So one of the other major departures for me was the Iphigenia thing.
Yeah, I was expecting her to be dead, but then when he was like explaining,
right, because she's supposed to be dead.
Yeah, I don't know. It was weird, because I was kind of expecting. Well, I don't know if I was expecting, but I was kind of thinking to myself as I was reading it, like, okay, well, if they set it up as Agamemnon's like a romantic interest for Achilles, is this like how do you get from this to the, you know, the spat of the stealing of the spoil? So I was like, oh, so maybe they're not going to go that way. So I was like, unless, you know, she gets all protective of, you know, Iphigenia, and then you know, it's like, surprise, she's killed. But they didn't take it that way, and I was like, oh, but what about the rain?
I kept waiting for the sacrifice. I was like, okay, so we've got this child. She's a priestess of Hera. She's going to be sacrificed at some point. I'm prepared for it. I know the story. And then it just never happens. It's like, what is... and then finally they've been in Troy for months and she's still alive, and I finally cotton on that actually this is not going to happen. I was like, oh, okay, interesting, we'll just go with it. It was, again, interesting and really well done, and like it gets more interesting as the book progresses.
Because it's like
we're just gonna leave
it's
it.
not even that she doesn't get killed. I was shocked that like they brought her with them to the war, and I was kind of like, okay, maybe they just use her to sort of do the ritual to pray for fair wind, and then they just kind of like peace out and leave her at home. But I was like, oh, they're bringing her with them.
She's coming with us.
So that was quite strange, but it adds a certain dimension because her interactions with Achilles are quite funny. Actually, I found them quite funny.
Yeah. The description of her kind of creeped me out a little bit, because she's a child, and then the introductory inscription describes her decked out in this priestess regalia, and it describes a ritual that she does involving the first dead soldier on the Greek side, and it's like, okay, so this is a child, but it's that creepy child not actually behaving like a child thing that for me is always very effective and deeply unsettling. But I think it was used to very great effect, and it ties into, for me, how the gods as a whole are portrayed. And we should come back to that after we finish our little, or not so little, summary of where the story goes.
So they basically get to Troy, and then a lot of the middle chapters of the first half were basically describing battle. So I guess I wasn't super shocked, because there's only so many ways you can describe a battle. I think the only thing that really shocked me was knowing how the Iliad goes. There's a billion smaller duels between the main players that break out, and so it's kind of like, is Ajax gonna fight? Is there gonna be the duel between Paris and Menelaus? And at least in the first part of the book, no. And there's a lot more adventuring around than I was expecting. They just kind of up and leave.
Yeah, they're like, we're just going to go on a cattle raid, because why not? Also, there are Amazons, which, fantastic, love it. But no, I was actually very, maybe not relieved, but it was a welcome change for me to have a book about what is essentially a 10-year long war not be just sitting at a siege camp and going out to battle. Like the narrative is so very focused on Achilles, I think that you bypass a lot of the maybe not boring stuff, but a lot of the one-on-one duels, and you get these little skirmishes that I think Maya has inserted into the narrative to make it, like, it gives you a chance to develop the relationships between the different characters, and I think it that's really cool. We should also talk about Mariapi. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
I think so. That's kind of how I pronounced it in my head too, Mariapi.
She is Patroclus's wife, and she's Egyptian, and the opening scene has her writing cuneiform. And okay, so I'm an Assyriologist. Cuneiform is absolutely my love, and it was wonderful. Not only was it like made my Assyriology heart happy, but because of where the novel is situated in history, it's so historically accurate. Maybe not to have royals themselves writing, because she's a princess, but to have cuneiform and Akkadian be the language of written communication. It was amazing, and I just was very appreciative. Maya's clearly done an awful lot of research.
When I read that, I was like, I could just imagine. I was like, oh, this is gonna make Megan so happy. I was like imagining your reaction. I was like, in my head, I had you being like, oh my gosh, it's cuneiform.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
And I love the unique choice of making her Egyptian too, because I was kind of like, okay, you can give Patroclus like a wife, whatever, she's probably gonna be right, and then
she's gonna be another Greek.
Not only is she Egyptian, but she can like speak 7 languages, and she does this, that, and the other thing, and has all these skills and talents. I was like, oh. I was like,
she's
can I have
amazing.
One of her?
She's amazing.
We
all should have.
and then the relationship also. Obviously we've talked a little about the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus in this new format, but I was a little shocked at okay, so how is the relationship with his wife gonna be, because we've never had the situation, and to have them be like, getting drunk on their first night together and then be like, we're besties, let's be sisters forever. And I'm like, what? Okay.
It's the female friendship we all want, essentially. And they kind of start off, and Achilles is like, who the hell are you? What are you doing with my cousin? He's mine. And then Mariapi is just so genuinely awesome and a nice person, I think. And yeah, they get drunk together and wake up, and they're inseparable.
I mean, even in her like little
wonderful
housewifishness, where it's like the first 2 seconds after, she's like oh, hello, I am blah, blah, blah. Would you like, wait, am I saying that right? I don't know these customs. Like, tell me if I'm wrong. And you're like, oh, you poor sweet thing. You're trying so hard.
You really want
to
make
honey,
a good
you don't
impression.
have to try that hard.
Yeah, so we meet Mariapi and Patroclus, and then like there's plot and things happen, but then Achilles, in an attempt to end the war early, like goes into Troy, disguises herself as a Trojan or Hittite, because in this book they're Hittites, which again, super awesome, love the historical context. But she disguises herself as a Hittite mourner and manages to get into the city without actually being stopped, and goes to the temple and puts down the greaves, the greaves of the deceased person, supposedly, and then ends up like breaking in, kind of like she does a little Assassin's Creed thing here, which again, very appreciative of. She kind of like goes over the roofs until she gets into the palace, and you're kind of tipped off early, well, not early, but you're tipped off before she meets Helen that actually there's something not quite right here, because it describes
glowing,
Helen as
right?
being she's standing in the courtyard surrounded by mirrors that people are holding up to like so she can see her reflection, and she's, I think, totally naked. And Achilles is like, you don't look like a prisoner. This is odd. And then when they meet, it's abundantly clear that Helen is there because she wants. I'm saying A and B a lot. It's apparently my brain is working in bullet points today. She's where she wants to be, and actually she is the one calling the shots in this entire situation. And Achilles just crumbles, essentially, because the plan of end the war early, everyone can go home, no one else has to die, is absolutely not going to work, because Helen's like, if you try and take me, I'm going to scream and this place is going to be full of soldiers and you don't have a hope in hell of surviving. And also, by the way, I've got magic now, so I'm going to she kisses her, and then Achilles wakes up in a field, a month later has lost, I think, maybe her clothes and this super awesome knife that Poseidon had gifted to her in the ocean. And you're like, what in God's name is going on here? This is, again, not a turn I was expecting it to take. Helen is this super powerful being who is encouraging and fomenting
she's
this
described
war
as this calculating, I think Achilles, goes in with a plan, and she's just like, okay, she's this captive. She's been described as having been stolen, damsel in distress. Yeah. I'm just going to grab her and go, easy peasy. And then gets in there, and it's
absolutely fine.
Oh, so
Helen's like, what took you? I was expecting you so much earlier, and you could have just walked in through the gate. Because
why would I walk through the gate of no. And it's so funny how she's just like, well, are you going to come back? Because I kind of hadn't imagined, what happens if you're unwilling to come with me. And she's just like, I'll go with the strongest, just win the war, and I'll come with you. Both Paris and Menelaus are just chill guys. One just took me and called me queen, and now I'm chilling here as a goddess.
Right, and as Achilles is going into the city, there are all of these golden statues to Helen. And you're like, what?
It was super trippy. It was super trippy because I was not. I mean, even if you just give her magic, no. I would be okay. Well, she's just got a little magic, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna build empires to myself, and you will worship me as a golden idol, kind of trippy. And I was like, whoa, no, no. Also, she's a lot more narcissistic than I thought.
She really is. She's awful.
Okay,
But easily the most dislikable character.
Is Agamemnon kind of the hot lover you wish you had, and Helen is the evil witch?
More sympathetic than Helen. This world, apparently. But yeah, not. And even like it even says in the dust jacket, in the center of it all is the cruel immortal Helen, who sees Achilles as a worthy enemy after a millennia of ennui and empty domination. You know, going into it, she's a bad guy. This is like the damsel in distress trope is on its head somehow, but she is so dislikable.
Yeah. I didn't think I
So
would
unpleasant.
really hate her as much as I mean, there's plenty of other portrayals, I suppose, where I didn't like her, but I didn't hate her. I was kind of just ambivalent, you know? But this is like, I don't like her at all. At all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to not like her. And then not only does she do that weird magic when Achilles is trying to like just like sneak in and capture her, a little later Achilles is told she needs to find some weapons, some magical weapons. So she goes raiding to the Queen Amazon's tomb to try to find the weapons, and like, spoiler alert, they're not there because Helen was there first, and she was like, I'm just gonna plant a kiss here,
Set a casual trap, why not?
yeah. And the power of my kiss will just like affect you. And
yeah.
I felt really bad for Athena. Like the owl just kind of gets, well, I mean, she was defending Achilles, but I was still just like cringing when I was reading how this poor owl is getting like scorched and hurt, and you're like, oh no.
Not the owl,
that,
please.
and then, I mean, talk about surprises. Did you expect to find Hera kind of like...
my God.
I don't know. I don't like her, but I don't hate her. And usually I hate Hera.
Yes. Yeah, again, I'm not expecting her to be on the side of Achilles. Even, like, not expecting really anything about how the gods are portrayed. Even a little bit. And you get in a lot of books, you do get this, like, the gods don't really care for human lives, and they're so much further above us, and we are but ants to them. Like, okay, yeah, fine. That I kind of expect that at this point. But these aren't even, like, pretending to be human. Not even a little bit. They are genuinely terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
No, I mean, I kind of like what Maya's done with it, because I mean, usually in any adaptations, it's really hard to figure out like, what do you do with the gods, because even in the original, you're kind of like, okay, so they're there and then they're not, and they're sort of interfering, but so it is interesting that they always come to sort of in a dream state, but then it's like something happens and it's like, oh well, the goddess was looking out for you, and you're like, but it's like her symbol, but it's not really her, but. Or is it? I felt like it really kept me on my toes, where I was kind of like, okay, is this an owl that's just a random symbol, but like it's not
representation, or is it actually Athena?
So that was really interesting. And then I guess we should probably mention that I really like what Maya's done with the intentional naming scheme, because definitely a lot of the original sort of Greek names are there, but then we also learn so many different variations from different cultures, and so then at any given point you'll drop one of the names and be like, okay, wait, which one is this again?
Yeah, no, it's very cleverly done, and it's something that I think kind of shows the level of research that has gone into the book, because synchronization or syncretization of deities is something, like, it's a historical fact. We know it happens. You can trace the connections and what god or goddess morphs into which god or goddess in a different culture. And having the very deliberate links drawn between all of them. I feel like I've seen it elsewhere before, but I think it's a very important way to round out the whole world, especially when you're talking about gods and goddesses in this case that are so, like, they're on absolutely a different plane of existence to the rest of the world. And I think making sure you emphasize that continuity over time and space really helps with the otherness.
Yeah, well, that, and then a lot of gods, especially like the Egyptian ones, are all gender bendy, and usually they're not as black and white as we make them. So I do love how like Maya was connecting like Athena to the Aten, and I don't know about you, but I'd never really stopped to consider, is Aten actually like male or female? I just know Aten, and then when she's like, yeah, it's Aten, Athena, it's the same person, and so it's a she. I was like, I Is it? I mean, I'm cool with that, but I'd never thought of it. And I was like, okay, it's a she.
No, it was interesting. Sure, we'll go with it. Why on earth not? No, it was very cool. And so once they've kind of had this thing with Helen and they've tried to find the Amazon weapons. Oh, we should talk about Perseus.
Yeah, that was so interesting because I was not expecting it. I mean, because the whole time I was thinking, and especially after the romance with like Agamemnon, I was kind of like, how is Perseus gonna, is it gonna,
how's the
like,
Perseus going to fit into this?
Like, Agamemnon gonna find Perseus, but I'm also like, but if we've clearly spent the first half of the novel setting up that, like, yes, Achilles now being a woman, she kind of is into men now. I mean, it doesn't mean she's not still bi in some way, but like, I just felt like it'd be an awkward fit because it made such a big deal of describing how much she was longing for Agamemnon and just describing her fascination with, like, looking at the male form. So I was like, okay, but then how would that work if Perseus is like a woman? Is she suddenly just gonna be like, no?
I like boobs too. I mean, why not? Yeah, but so Perseus is not only not the daughter of... so I'm missing up my Iliad remembrances. Was she a priestess in the original? Yeah. So she's not only not a priestess, she's not a she. He's an Amazon, a trans man in the Amazon tribe, who, from the sounds of things, has gone through like a corollary to Achilles' experiences as a child, because growing up in a tribe dominated by warlike women, they don't understand that this person in a woman's body is not actually a woman. He's a man. So it kind of explains how he's had to essentially change his body, like give himself a double mastectomy. So, is it mastectomy? No. Yeah. What's the word? Yeah. Okay, good. Sorry. To be taken seriously as a man by the rest of his tribe. And he actually betrays his tribe out of vengeance, maybe, or...
It did.
It came off as vengeance. And then ends up traveling with Achilles and Meriapi and Patroclus to Egypt.
Also, I'm just like, when did they have time to go to Egypt?
I know!
No, I was like, Egypt? Why are they going to Egypt? This is really weird. And then when they're like, yeah, but we need grain because it's a 10-year-long war. And how do you think we got our food? We couldn't just steal from the, like, that they're like, oh.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that was unexpected.
No, the trip to Egypt was cool. Yeah, also very unexpected, but it was like a nice little diversion. And again, when you're writing a book about a war that lasts 10 years, having something that changes the scenery a little bit and kind of moves the plot forward was, I think, a good thing. And then, Meriapi can do magic is the other thing. It doesn't really happen in the beginning of the book, and then halfway through the first, I guess a quarter of the way through the book, they're like, so Achilles is kind of a goddess now and the gods are moving in the world, so maybe Meriapi can do magic. And she does, and it's awesome, and they manage to learn or get the ability to speak and understand all languages ever, including the dolphin language. And I'm like, so jealous. You have no idea how jealous I am. That's amazing. Except it turns out dolphins are essentially sex pests.
Yeah, but it's funny because I was just like, all of the creatures that we were going to portray, I don't think I was expecting dolphins. I would have been like, let's talk to horses or something. You know, the fact that Meriapi and the whole first half of the book, she's kind of just, you know, I've always wondered what dolphin speak is like. And you're just like, what is her weird fascination with these things?
This is so bizarre, yeah.
And you're like, are you serious right now? And she's like, yes, I'm very serious, you know, and you're sort of just kind of sitting there thinking, why?
What is their grammar? How does it work? I don't know. And then they find out because they can talk to dolphins.
And she's all like, you know, we're just bad linguists, so we're just disconnected from animals. We don't know what they're saying. And you're like, oh, okay, sure.
Why not?
I'm just a bad linguist. I don't know what they were saying. That's very inventive.
And yet she says a couple of times in the story, essentially, you don't want to speak to dolphins. After gaining the ability to speak to dolphins and after spending all this time wondering how dolphins speak, she's like, no, that was a bad move. No one speak to dolphins ever. Leave them alone.
I mean, I didn't know how far we could lean into the fact that they're the only mammals outside of humans that reproduce for fun rather than necessity. But she leans right into the dolphins and that they're like begging everyone, hey, why don't you take your clothes off?
Come into the water. Can we have sex with humans without drowning them? Which, is, again, not a debate I was expecting dolphins to be having, but apparently is a hot topic of conversation.
When I was reading. I was just like, this isn't even a conversation that I would be having in my own brain. No, I would not have imagined spending any seconds of my entire life imagining whether that was a thing that could or could not happen. And then, well, it did.
Well, there we go. I will never forget this. Thank you, Maya.
Yes, thank you so much, Maya. I mean, I know you hinted to it, but oh my gosh. But yeah, so we read up to chapter 19, which is kind of where they set off to Egypt. So 19, I'm assuming, is when they arrive in Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they head out to Egypt, and there's kind of a revelation for Meriapi in like chapter 18. So throughout the first half of the book, she's a super devout person. She comes from the lineage of Ra, and she prays regularly. And then Achilles kind of has to tell her, and this is revealed to Achilles by like Athena and Hera earlier on in the story. You get a bit of like backstory of the gods' war, but Achilles has to reveal to Meriapi that actually Ra is dead and was killed by the other gods. And it just is like this huge, not even heartbreak. She's furious. She's absolutely incandescently furious. And it's impressive.
Yeah. I mean, I would be as well. I mean, Look, if you spend how many years of your life being like, I'm going to sacrifice everything and pray to Ra all the time, and then have someone she didn't like kind of be revealed. Yeah, she didn't know that this would crush her sister's soul. It was a very matter-of-fact way, like, oh yes, and Ra's dead. And like, what?
By the way.
So then that made me think of, like if someone had this big revelation and told me this in such a matter-of-fact way, and it was like, yeah, just get over it. That was, yes, it was. I don't know. I mean, I guess since we did mention it, since Maya clearly did a lot of research to tie all these cultures together, there are certain, are there certain names, I suppose, that you prefer in the book that she uses that maybe aren't the traditional ones, or the way she refers to a place or a thing?
I liked in, I think, closer to the beginning, one of the camp councils between all of the kings, they were talking about the place names of some of the cities. And one of, I think maybe Agamemnon said, well, they're like, they all have the same name. And Patroclus is like, actually, they don't. They have different names. We're just really bad linguists. And we never bothered learning what the actual place names were. And Agamemnon was like, I suppose your wife told you that. And he's like, yes, she did. I enjoyed that quite a lot because it felt kind of, I don't know. I don't know if it was intended to be a dig at like Western colonialism, but it was, it came across as that, and I thought that was quite clever.
Yeah, I don't have a problem. I mean, I read that and was kind of like, oh, we're just pointing to that we're kind of awful and we don't care to, learn the things. But
that
I was like, okay. So I kind of read it and it was just kind of like, okay, yep, agree, cool. I kept going. Which is funny because I know some people who might have read that and like, so I do love how I read that. And I was like, okay, yes, I agree. Let's keep going.
How about you? What names really caught your attention?
Actually, like we know Iphigenia, but I really like how she's called Iphigenia. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I like that a lot. And, she's changed around a lot of the epitaphs for some of the gods as well, which I really appreciated. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're all so unique.
I liked the little, not really tangent, but again, near the beginning, there's this flashback of Achilles. And so I don't know Greek. I'm going to say that right now. I don't know Greek. Achilles was remembering her family using her name and using the male form of the name and flatly refusing to use the female form. And I didn't even realize that was a thing. So that was educational for me, but it was an interesting corollary to dead naming in modern trans life. And then you have something similar when Perseus turns up, because Perseus is not called Perseus, and I don't actually know how to pronounce it with the W.
Perseus. It was Perseus.
That works. I like it. And it's a really good indication, because you read it and you're expecting Perseus and you're expecting a timid priestess, and then it's not either a timid priestess or Perseus. It's Perseus, who is this badass trans Amazon soldier warrior type man. And you're like, whoa, not only are you super attractive as written, but you're a completely different character and different personality to what we would expect.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And it's interesting because I will also admit that while I did major in classics, I took one semester of ancient Greek, and then I invested 2 years in modern Greek at different times. Not consecutively, but I've had more modern than ancient. So I don't remember a lot of how ancient works, but I thought it interesting because just thinking about the names in the modern context, she was describing it. It's Achilles as the male, and then the female version should be Achilleas. And it's interesting because in the modern Greek, a lot of as endings are still male names. So I was sitting there because I look at these names and it's more modern than ancient Greek.
Yes.
And I was just thinking you would say Achilleas in the modern Greek and it's still kind of a male form. So I was, I don't know. It's maybe it's, I'm embarrassed because I'm not remembering, but I do find it quite interesting, and it shows the difference between ancient and modern Greek, if anything. So, yeah, it was really interesting, and the names, those were really interesting as well. And I also admit that a lot of these versions, I've not actually read or seen any of these versions before or in a very long time, so a lot of it was me being confused and wait, is this right? Does this track? I think so. It sounds right, but I don't remember.
No, it was all of it, I think, very, very well done. And I mean, I highly recommend it to really anyone who enjoys historical fiction and likes Greek mythology. It's beautifully written.
And I love how I think one thing that really stood out to me as well is that obviously it's not good, but there have been people, obviously, who take stabs at writing stories, from a different perspective, who don't identify as such. And I think it's quite lovely, a trans story comes from a trans author, and a lot of what's being described, it comes off so well because it sounds like it could be personal.
It's lived experience, yeah.
Yeah, experience. So even then, I think it's chapter 2 when Achilles is kind of describing the shame of having a male body, it's like reading through a story through the lens of Achilles. But, I found myself being oh my God, this is also interesting. Is this how it really feels if you're trans? So it was so compelling for that reason as well. And it sort of transcended the story itself.
It was very poignantly written.
Yeah, I mean, and I appreciated it. So just writing, that Achilles was ashamed of people seeing her body as she, has to volumize her chest, this, that, and the other thing. And she was talking about being petrified of people discovering, I think, that she's inevitably a boy. And she was first kind of dreading being found out by Odysseus and Diomedes, and she's, she was like, oh my God, well, they're going to find me out. So, well, this is embarrassing, but they're going to do it. So I should, figure it out. Like, yeah, they're going to make me strip.
They're going to make me strip, and yeah.
Yeah, I can't hide the shame that I'm physically male. So I was really intrigued because I didn't want to see it, but if it had actually been a scene in the book, I wonder how it would have been handled. But luckily, the goddess magic just made the problem go away.
Right.
When
Athena intervenes.
Yeah, Athena intervenes. So when I read that she's like in a dream and she's kind of agreeing that she'll make Achilles a woman, I was like, oh, okay, we're just going to talk about it being a fear and skip it, luckily, thankfully, and just, oh, I am physically a woman now. Yeah, I wasn't entirely disappointed by the turn of events or that just goddess magic solved everything. I mean, that would make a lot of things easier, right? If you were just like, I'm dreading this. Oh, goddess magic. It's solved.
It's just not going to happen. Oh, perfect. Perfect.
So I did really appreciate that. But yeah, it's beautifully written. It's very witty.
It is. It's very funny. And clever. I keep saying how clever it is. It really is very, very clever.
I mean, were you expecting it to kind of be this funny, or were you expecting it more serious?
I think more serious and less joyful, if that's maybe the right way to term it, because even though they're in the middle of the war, Achilles is like, there's this contagious joy. I mean, Achilles is a quintessential warrior and it seems genuinely takes delight in being in battle. But then the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus and Meriape is so, it's just wholesome, and it's love and it's joy, and it's very, very like pleasant to read about. And you kind of, it's easy to put yourself in those shoes and think about yourself being with people you love and people you're close to, and you're like, oh, this is, again, not what I was expecting in a book about a war, but very welcome.
And also that the sort of friendship she has with Odysseus and Diomedes, she's like, hey, let's be a buddy team up and go on these raiding quests.
Yeah. Let's go raid the cattle and
you're just like, y'all like broing out over here.
Just having fun. Yeah, it's the ancient Greek equivalent of, I don't know, going golfing or something.
A little more dangerous for sure, but let's go on a dangerous golf trip where, your golf clubs might suddenly turn on you and attack you.
Oh, also very much not expecting, so we've kind of talked about the relationship between Achilles and Agamemnon. Was not expecting sex.
No.
Not even. I was like, are we doing this? Apparently we are. Okay.
I mean, usually I was like, yeah, it was marketed as YA. It's YA, right? Or something.
Actually, so the cover looks very YA, but I don't know where it sits.
I think it was. And that was my confusion, because I don't know where it actually sat, because I was thinking it was going to be more like a Percy Jackson type of book.
I was expecting more, Percy Jackson Hunger Games kind of level.
Then it's like full on, yeah.
And then Achilles breaks into Agamemnon's bedchambers on the ship and is like, I'm having my way with you, sir.
Like the thunderstorm. And then,
go, girl.
She's even like, well, he has a wife, he's married, but I don't care. And then it's like the graphics just sort of.
That was amazing.
Yeah, like what's being described is very graphic. And then there's that one war council scene, right? Where she was just like, I could spend my time paying attention to this war council and strategizing.
Or I could not.
But I'd rather like just focus on your eyes and what I'm trying to remember, or that's how she describes it. And then you're like, wait, okay, so she just waits until they're alone. And then she propositions him, and I'm like, okay, that's unexpected. I was like, okay, well, they're still waiting, so is this relationship going to turn sour? Because I know, like, in the original...
It does, yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it does.
Well, the whole Iliad is...
Yeah, they don't have a good relationship.
Achilles sulking in his tent.
Yeah.
And it, like, none of that. Well, no, actually, that's a lie. But there's no disagreement between Agamemnon and Achilles. They have a really, I don't know, good relationship. And I was also expecting a lot more like transphobia from the other kings and the other royalty. Yeah. And I was pleased that that wasn't the case. They're all very much, you're a woman. Okay. You're still a warrior. We still need you to win this battle. And it was nice because it kind of, again, moved the story forward. I didn't feel like it dwelt on the negative, hurtful aspects of how people can relate to trans people. It was like after the childhood trauma part, it was actually, everyone was, I would say, pretty accepting and just treated Achilles like the woman she was, which is a woman with a big goddamn spear who can and will fuck you up. It was great. We really need to put a language warning on these podcasts.
Oh, of course. Don't worry. I mean, come on. You're talking about the ancient world stories where there's like sex, drugs, and not alcohol, but sort of alcohol, but you know, whatever. But yeah. No, I mean, I think we both just keep saying that we love this book and it's amazing, but it really is shocking, but like shocking in the best way possible. And then there's so many unexpected things that you and I were like, wait, what? Okay. And I think, I don't know if I was expecting more transphobia from the kings, only because she doesn't meet anyone. I mean, she doesn't meet anyone until after she's transformed physically into a woman. And I don't know if you got this, but my sense was that when they kind of were like, oh, we remember you, they always kind of remembered her as just a scrawny, small, but powerful warrior.
This little kid, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if it dawned on them, because it feels like she was really kind of secretive about the fact that she was a trans woman, only because she only ever wanted them to know her as a woman. And at that point, she was too small of a child for anyone to really notice or know beyond. So maybe that's just me, but I don't know. It was weird, but
also the cover is beautiful. We have to say that
the cover is so beautiful,
stunning. And I think before we even read the book, we were in rhapsodies over the cover. You should just, everyone stop what you're doing and Google it, because it is gorgeous.
I mean, the cover is what sparked a billion of our discussions, wasn't it? Where we just, I think we geeked out about the cover itself for like 20 minutes. Just, I would totally pay the cover artist to, paint that in my house. And and this has got me really excited to read the second half of the book. I mean, I just couldn't put it down and was like, oh no, I have other things to do, but I just want to read it.
It was very compelling. I didn't find, like, sometimes in books there's slower bits and you're like, I'm going to take a break. It was actually very difficult for me to put this down and attend to my actual life. It's like, no, I want to read more about Achilles. It's very important. Everyone else go away.
It's just the kind of book where you want to lock yourself in a room for like a week. Not even. I don't think you'd need a week to, I mean, you basically just read, and if you read, you would finish it in like a night maybe. I mean, I read the entire 7th Harry Potter book in like 24 hours, so you could do this in like 12 if you just sat and read, but I kind of liked that because I actually had to do stuff in between reading chapters. It was really fun. It was like a TV series where, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to read these 3 chapters now, and then, stop at a cliffhanger and then run and do this stuff, or you have to sleep a bit and then wake up and then read a chapter. Yeah, so it was really kind of cool to have it broken up into segments, If you're listening and want to read, don't feel like you have to read it in one segment. You might want to, but you don't have to, because it's written in a way where it's still compelling enough that you can stop. Because it's not like I have to know what's coming, unless maybe you're in like a certain chapter, but that's okay. I have to know what's coming sometimes, but you can definitely break it up. But it's so good. It's just so fun. Hey, thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review, and you can also follow us on social media at The Reading Party Podcast. If you'd like to leave us a book or movie suggestion, then email us at thereadingpartypod@gmail.com. See you next week.